It began like any other morning in a quiet little town. The sun lifted slowly above rooftops, sprinklers tapped against lawns, and neighbors waved across fences. The air was filled with the ordinary sounds of life, the scrape of chairs, the rumble of buses, the voices of parents hurrying children along. Inside one home, the morning started with joy. A child, bright, curious, and full of promise, laughed over breakfast while packing books into a backpack. "Don't be late," the mother reminded gently. The father leaned down with a hug and said, "See you after school." It was the last ordinary moment they would share that day. The walk to school was short and familiar. 2 blocks, a turn by the old oak tree, and across the crosswalk where a volunteer usually waved. It was a routine repeated countless times. Nothing seemed unusual. No reason for worry. But that morning, something sinister lingered unseen. At 8:43 a.m., the first alarm sounded. The school called home, "We haven't seen your child in class." The mother's heart skipped. The father's face grew pale. At first, they hoped it was a mistake, perhaps late, perhaps distracted. But as minutes stretched into hours, dread replaced hope. By 9:10 a.m., the father grabbed his keys and began retracing the route. Nothing. No sign, no sound, no trace. By 9:37, police had been contacted. 2 patrol cars arrived, and officers listened carefully as the parents described clothing, shoes, and the little zipper pull shaped like a star attached to the backpack. The search was now official. By late morning, the community was involved. Volunteers combed the park, voices echoing the child's name. Flyers were taped to posts and shop windows. Teenagers who had never spoken to the family before joined the search, shouting until their throats were raw. Fragments of testimony began to emerge. A jogger recalled a dark sedan idling by the curb. A delivery driver noticed a man leaning against a fence, watching the street. A woman watering her flowers thought she heard a quick, sharp cry, but dismissed it as ordinary play. Each account added weight, yet the truth still slipped through their fingers. By noon, news crews had gathered. Cameras flashed as the local sergeant gave a statement. "We are doing everything possible. We ask residents to review security footage, check garages, sheds, anywhere a child might be." Standing behind him, the parents clutched each other's hands. The mother whispered, "Please, just bring my baby home." The father repeated to anyone who would listen, "It was only 5 minutes to school." Afternoon bled into evening. Neighbors handed out stacks of flyers. Strangers delivered food to the family's doorstep. The child's uneaten lunch still sat on the dining table, untouched. At 6:02 p.m., investigators changed the classification. "We are treating this as a missing child case with suspicious circumstances." By 6:45, they said the word no one wanted to hear: abduction. Night fell heavy. Floodlights illuminated the streets as K-9 units tracked faint scents. A drone buzzed above, searching the edges of town. At 9:11 p.m., an officer found something small in the gutter, the star-shaped zipper pull. The mother gasped and collapsed into the arms of a relative. At 10 p.m., the first vigil began. Families gathered with candles. A pastor read Psalm 121, "I lift up my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from?" A child asked softly, "Will they be cold tonight?" And the mother answered, "God will keep them warm." The town sang hymns into the darkness. Inside the command post, detectives mapped timelines and compared notes. A bakery security camera showed a blur at 8:21. Too quick, too unclear. Rumors circulated about highway sightings and strangers knocking on doors, but each lead fizzled. Still, the officers refused to stop. After midnight, The house was silent. The mother sat at the table gripping a mug of cold tea. The father stared through the window at the empty street and whispered, "If you can hear us, hold on. We're coming." A detective promised, "We won't stop until we find them." At dawn, the search resumed. Volunteers returned with thermoses. The sergeant urged, "Check every shed, every basement, every corner." Strangers became teammates, united by one mission. Then, late that morning, came a critical tip. A jogger provided part of a license plate for the dark sedan. Analysts narrowed it down to a handful of vehicles. One belonged to a man in a nearby town, a man with a troubling history. Officers moved quickly, quiet as breath, surrounding a parked car in an abandoned lot. The engine was cold, the windows dusty, and inside, something glinted, an item belonging not to the car, but to the child. Investigators had been chasing shadows, but now, finally, they had something real. Yellow tape cordoned off the area. Officers leaned close, flashlights piercing the dusty windows. And there it was, the missing child's belongings. On the back seat lay a small shoe, scuffed at the toes from playground games. Beside it, a notebook. The first page carried the child's name, neat handwriting, letters still filled with innocence. Detectives went silent. They had found the break they prayed for, but it also confirmed the community's greatest fear. The vehicle was towed immediately. At the forensic lab, experts in gloves and masks combed through every inch. They lifted fingerprints from the steering wheel, collected fibers from the seats, and scraped soil from the tires. They bagged and tagged every piece of evidence. One detective whispered to another, "This car is a crime scene. Somewhere in here, the truth is hiding." The license plates led to a man in a neighboring town. His background raised every red flag: arrests for petty crimes, troubling behavior, and whispers of incidents with children that never made it to court. Neighbors described him as strange, always indoors, curtains drawn even at noon. One woman said, "I used to see him watching the kids walk to school. It gave me chills." For 2 days, unmarked police cars lined his street. Plainclothes officers trailed him to the corner store, back home, then out again. He seemed nervous, looking over his shoulder as if he knew the net was closing in. When the lab confirmed that his fingerprints matched those found inside the car, investigators moved swiftly. The arrest was quiet but decisive. Officers approached the house, scrunching their back. A fist pounded on the door. "Police, open up." Moments later, he was in handcuffs. He muttered denials, claiming he knew nothing, insisting the car had been borrowed. But detectives weren't buying it. At headquarters, the interrogation began. Detectives laid the evidence on the table: the shoe, the notebook, the zipper pull found in the gutter. The suspect's voice wavered. "I don't know how those got there." His hands trembled. Hours passed. The questions grew sharper, and at last, the truth broke through his lies. He confessed. He had taken the child, lured them into the car, and driven away. His motives were selfish, twisted, and cruel. Detectives, hardened by years of service, stared at the table in silence. "Don't ever get used to hearing this." Never. The news of the arrest spread. It made so believable. Parents loved their children tired. Strangers embraced the street. Schools called emergency meetings, tightening security. Yet at the same time, sorrow deepened, because the truth about the child's fate was even harder to bear. The family's agony became national news. Cameras gathered outside their home, broadcasting their pain to the world. The mother's cry echoed as officers delivered the confirmation. "Why our child? Why us?" The father stood frozen, whispering again and again, "We only wanted them home." The trial began months later. Crowds packed the courthouse, lining the steps outside. Reporters jostled for space, microphones thrust forward. Inside, the parents sat silently, faces pale with grief but determined to hear every word. The prosecution laid out the evidence piece by piece: the car, the fingerprints, the confession. Forensic experts took the stand, explaining how fibers, DNA, and timelines all connected. Witnesses testified about seeing the man loitering near the school route. One juror later said, "The evidence was overwhelming. We knew the truth." The defense tried to argue mental instability, painting the suspect as unwell rather than evil. But the jury wasn't swayed. After hours of deliberation, they returned with a verdict: guilty on all counts. The judge's words were steady but final: "You are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." The gavel struck, echoing through the courtroom. Some cried tears of relief, others of sorrow. Justice had been served, but no verdict could bring the child back. For the family, closure was only partial. The empty chair at the dinner table remained. The sound of laughter in the hallway was gone forever. For the community, the case left scars. Parents became more protective. Children were no longer allowed to walk alone. Streets once filled with carefree play now carried an edge of caution. Yet something else rose from the ashes of grief: unity. The community rallied together. Neighbors checked on one another more often. Churches opened their doors for prayer and counseling. A memorial was built near the school, a small garden, planted with flowers, with a plaque engraved with the child's name. Each spring, it bloomed, reminding everyone of a life lost too soon but never forgotten. Even years later, people would recall the kidnapping that vanished without a trace. They would remember the flyers, the vigils, the endless search. They would remember the fear, the heartbreak, and the determination never to let it happen again. The story of the child who vanished is more than a case file. It is a reminder that safety is fragile, justice is essential, and life is precious. Out of tragedy came sorrow, but also a lesson: to guard our children, to cherish our loved ones, and to never take an ordinary day for granted. And now I ask you, do you believe justice was truly enough? Or could more have been done to prevent this tragedy? Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Vault of True Crime for more real-life stories that matter. Until next time, stay safe.